Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers post-game reaction show. Just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where that was rough. That was a rough one. Lakers lost 146 to 115. 146 is a season high in points allowed by the Lakers. It ties the franchise record for points allowed in a home game in regulation with a game in 1984 when the game was played with a certain pace and the scoring was juiced up a bit. Not unlike today's game, but still not a great side anytime you are tying the franchise record for points allowed in a home game in regulation. Lakers got embarrassed, crushed, thrashed, shellacked, overpowered. Pick whatever verb you want to use. This was just a terrible performance tonight. The Miami game will always be the worst loss of the season for me because it really just felt like the Lakers openly quit in the second half of that game in the third quarter. They lost by 41. But this game is right up there with any other game this season in terms of worst loss. And there's a lot to get into. I think that there are some silver linings. There are some positives to look forward to. But this was a bad loss, and there's no way around that. But before we get into it, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to you guys tuning in tonight. I understand if you don't want to tune in, if you don't want to listen, if you don't want to watch, but hopefully you do. And I have some things that I think will hopefully make you feel a little bit better. But certainly tonight was just atrocious and embarrassing. My overarching thought is the Lakers are back, ... but they have to become reconnected. And this was the theme with JJ Redick's post-game interview tonight, where he talked about he wasn't sure if the group just felt because LeBron and Rui were back that they were just going to pick up where they were 3 weeks ago when they were playing some of the best basketball in the league. They were on that 8-game win streak, and Rui went down during that win streak. But they obviously had gone, they had that stretch there where they won 20 of 24, and they were looking like on par with Oklahoma City and Boston and Cleveland and Denver and whoever else you want to put at the top of the league. And they've continued to I mean, they had the 0-4 road trip, then they bounced back with 3 straight wins. Then they punted on the Milwaukee game, and then tonight just got ran off the floor. So I would say glass half full viewpoint on tonight is that the Lakers are back. LeBron played, Rui played. This is something that we've been talking about over the past week leading into tonight's game, and it finally happened. Both guys got cleared. And I think with the Lakers having now 12 games remaining this season, it is important for them to be as whole as possible and get as many reps together as possible. So I think in that sense, like putting the loss aside for a moment, big picture, it's good for them to be whole for now. And I would not be surprised if they got 3 more back-to-backs. Maybe there is some resting, some selective resting with some of the guys down the stretch. You got LeBron with the groin, Rui with the knee, Luka has a knee and ankle stuff that he's dealing with. Austin has like 5 things he's dealing with. DFS has the ankle. Gabe has the knee. So like, I think there will be Vando has the groin. Like there will be some stuff that those guys manage over the next 12 games. But in terms of big picture outlook, like it is a positive that the Lakers are rounding into form with about 3 weeks left in the regular season. And ideally, LeBron and Rui never got injured. They were able to continue their momentum. They were able to continue winning games at the same rate, and they were able to continue getting those reps. But that didn't happen but they ended up coming back a little bit earlier than what could have been. There was some reporting about LeBron potentially coming back next week. And so him being back, Rui being back, I think those are big picture positives. Now they have to get reconnected, right? And that was what JJ talked about of it doesn't, you don't just pick up where you were 3 weeks ago. You're at ground zero. You have to take the steps to get reconnected. He said they don't have a lot of time, that they need to get reconnected by Monday morning when they go through their film session and their walkthrough ahead of the Orlando game in Orlando. So he was like, he gave the group some grace tonight. He said he didn't want to make any excuses, but he was like, we just played 6 games in 8 days. Technically now 7 games in 10 days. We just got LeBron and Rui back. That changed things on both sides of the ball. And whether it was just the cumulative effect of the past 10 days catching up to them, or some human nature element of them kind of taking their foot off the gas with LeBron and Rui there, he felt like the group deserves some grace. And again, within reason, not to fully dismiss the outcome or the defensive performance. But I think clearly the Lakers were not on the same page really on either side of the ball. And they were down 3 at halftime, but it was kind of fluky. It was a lot of just Luka step backs and Luka just being Luka and kind of saving them in the first half. Austin also had a good first half offensively, but if not for some of the shots that those guys were hitting, this already was looking like a 10, 15 point deficit at halftime, to say nothing of it just snowballed in the third quarter. After giving up 65 in the first half, they gave up 39 in the third quarter. So, and then 81 overall in the second half. So just, again, like I don't want to overreact to this loss or this defensive performance, because I do think the Lakers have been one of the best defensive teams in the league for almost 3 months. They have not had a performance like this. I would say maybe the closest would be like the Dallas loss at the beginning of the season, at the beginning of January. I think this is obviously worse, but like in terms of guys going like at guys one-on-one at their chest, just beating them off the dribble, point of attack, like embarrassing defense. I think it's been almost 3 months since they've had a performance like this. And really, I think you'd have to go back to December, where like that late November, December stretch, they had like blown out in the second half against Denver, blown out in the second half against Phoenix, blown out at Miami, blown out at Minnesota. So there was that stretch there of about a couple weeks where they had a bunch of concerning defensive performances and like second half collapses in a row. And this was reminiscent of that. And we hadn't really seen that with the Luka group yet. Like they had, when they had lost, it had often been because they were shorthanded. They had the loss at Utah, but Jackson went out early, and that was kind of a weird one, like right before the All-Star break. They had the Charlotte loss. But again, that was like them still feeling out first few games of Luka. I don't like, those were bad losses, but I don't really like, they haven't played like that since then. So this was an uncharacteristic loss for the Lakers. This was, I think, an out of character performance, but I'm not, there are things I am worried about from this game that I will be touching on in one of my takeaways. But like, I don't think this erases what they've done. Again, this, like, they have not had a terrible loss like this in quite a while. And I think given the circumstances of how many games they played in such a short amount of time, getting LeBron back, he was a bit out of rhythm. Getting Rui back, he was a bit out of rhythm. And I still think them trying to figure out like their rotation. And Chicago made some insane shots. They've been playing well. They've won 7-9. But the second half shooting, they were 5 for 22, I believe, in the first half on threes, 14-19 in the second half. Plenty of those were wide open and Lakers breakdowns defensively. But some of those were like contested step backs. I mean, Kobe White was amazing. Josh Giddey, Buzelis, the rookie, a lot of big performances from the Chicago side. But I think for the Lakers here, it's ramping up now for the playoffs and building toward what this group will be 3 weeks from now, which we're 3 weeks away from the postseason. But the key is going to be them reconnecting as soon as possible. Notable performance tonight. It feels inappropriate to even mention anybody, but I will give Luka, 34 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 10 for 18 shooting, 8 for 13 threes. He was 1 3-pointer away from tying his career high of 9, 6 for 8 from the free throw line. Did have 7 turnovers, and he and LeBron combined for 12. Austin had 25 points, 5 assists, 9 of 13 shooting. LeBron had 17, 6 and 4, 3 steals, 5 turnovers, 7 of 16 shooting. He got going a little bit late. Jackson had 10 points. DFS had a rough performance, only played 21 minutes, 2 points, 5 fouls. And he's often a plus minus darling tonight. Lakers were outscored by 19 in his 21 minutes. Everyone was a negative tonight in terms of plus minus, but Luka was the only starter who was a single digit negative. Everyone else was minus 17 or worse. And then the bench, Rui was on a minutes restriction, only played 18 minutes. Vando was detrimental offensively, and this has kind of been a trend recently with him where he has almost looked, I don't want to say unplayable, but kind of unplayable offensively with how he's been on that end. Gabe hit a couple threes early in the fourth to give the Lakers some juice, but I thought he was attacked off the dribble. He looked too small against some of these guys, and he didn't have a good, he was turning down a lot of shots early after he missed a couple. Jordan Goodwin, I thought was their best bench player tonight. He competed 4 points, 3 rebounds, an assist, a steal. He was doing his stuff and picking up fouls, tip outs, all that stuff. Had a couple offensive rebounds. So I think he was the only bench player who played close to expectations. And then stat of the night, I mean, where do you guys want to start, right? Like 146 points, season high in points allowed. Ties the franchise record for most points allowed in a home game in regulation. They had a 141.3. I repeat, a 141.3 defensive rating tonight. That is like mind-boggling. Like that is a mind-boggling number. That is mind-bogglingly bad. I'm just making up words now. 27 points allowed off of turnovers, 74 paint points, and 30 fast break points, which I feel like is a typo. They allowed more than 30. I guess if you do like semi transition or early offense, that's got to be way higher because Chicago was running all over them. And again, I'm going to touch on that in a second with one of my takeaways. So takeaway number 1 for me is LeBron and Rui are back. So interestingly, and I think this likely has to do with the minutes restriction, but Rui came off the bench. They went with DFS as the 5th starter. LeBron returned to the starting lineup. So it was Jackson, LeBron, DFS, Austin, and Luka as the starting 5. It was the 3rd game they'd played together as starters. They were 2-0. Now they dropped to 2-1. As I mentioned, Rui only played 18 minutes. LeBron ended up playing 31 minutes. The Lakers, like the way this game ended was Patrick Williams relocates to the weak side of the floor. Nobody picks him up. No one's like tracking him. It was actually LeBron's guy. He leaves, I believe, to switch on to Vucevic, but I think there's a miscommunication there between him and Luka. So Patrick Williams just kind of runs through the lane, goes to the weak side. No one is guarding him or paying attention to him. Josh Giddey fires an overhead pass. He drains the 3. Bulls go up by 20. Then Luka inbounds the ball to LeBron. LeBron's kind of like not really paying attention. He grabs the ball and tries to go into his dribble and just kind of throws it and just loses the ball. Giddey rolls to Giddey. He collects it for one of his 8 steals tonight. Giddey was incredible. Then he pitches the ball to Kobe White, who LeBron then picks up. He dances with LeBron, hits a step back 3. Bulls go up 23 with, I believe, 6:42 left. Lakers call timeout and then empty the bench. And that was it. It was like from 17 to 23 in literally a few seconds because of a blown defensive coverage and miscommunication, a careless turnover, and then an impossible shot from Chicago. And I felt like that 7-second stretch or whatever it was really encapsulated just the entire game in like a 3-possession bang, bang, bang. Like, Lakers awful defensively, careless with the ball, and then Chicago also making some tough shots. Like those were the 3 pillars to me of how tonight went. But in terms of Luka and LeBron and Rui, I think you those are the guys I give a little bit of grace to, just because, or more grace than the rest of the group, just because they missed so much time. Rui was out for almost 3 weeks. LeBron was out for exactly 2 weeks. And I mean, LeBron typically comes back and it doesn't look like he's missed a beat. I thought tonight he was a bit rusty early, careless with the ball, not as active and engaged defensively. Rui shared post game that he's at about like 70 to 80% physically, and that really what he needs is rest, but that's not really he's not considering that right now. That's not an option for him. So he's going to be playing through this tendinopathy in his knee, and that he's going to be like 70 to 80%. So I wonder, like, kind of looking forward, if JJ said Rui's going to be on like a 20 to 24 minutes restriction, and maybe this ends up being a situation where he does stay on the bench, at least for the short term, because of the minutes restriction and because he's not 100% or even close to 100% physically. So this could kind of alter the way that the Lakers' rotation functions, the way that some of their lineups function. It's not ideal to not have Rui close to 100%. Obviously, it's better to have him than not have him. And I think even a somewhat physically compromised Rui is better than the alternative. But it does, like, that is a factor. Rui has been the Lakers' 4th best and 4th most important player for a lot of this stretch. And to have him not be close to 100% is unfortunate, and that is a blow. LeBron, I'm not worried about. I think LeBron will be fine. He was having some monster games before he got injured. It's LeBron. Like, I'm not gonna overreact to this one. I thought, again, that there was going to be a little bit of an adjustment period of having 2 starters, 2 big pieces be out for as long as they were out for, and then coming back. I think it was important to get them back in a home game right before this 4-game road trip. But I'm not, like, with both of those guys. With LeBron, he's going to be LeBron, I think, as soon as Monday. With Rui, this is something to monitor now in terms of like what he's going to look like, what his role is going to be, and how long it's affected by this knee situation. But I still, if it's more DFS, some more Goodwin, maybe some bigger lineups with like more Jackson, I guess. Like, I think the Lakers can kind of figure that out. It's not ideal though, and I don't think there's any way around it being like somewhat of a blow for this group. Takeaway number 2 is my primary concern coming out of this game. And it is hard to separate like how much of this was fatigue and maybe the Lakers overlooking the Bulls versus like I kind of view this as like what's real versus what's not. There was some remarkable shot making from the Bulls, and I don't think that's sustainable. I think they had a really hot shooting night. So that's part of it. But, and the Lakers were uncharacteristic defensively in terms of their rotating, in terms of some of the breakdowns, the miscommunication. Like that's not how they've been defending for, again, most of the past like 2+ months. So off nights happen in the NBA. That this is not, it's not rare to, like, this was an extreme off night to be clear, but like off nights happen, and the Lakers have had off nights. OKC's had off nights. Boston's had off nights. Cleveland's had off nights. Like the best teams, the 2016 Warriors lost 9 times, and like they had off nights. Like everybody has off nights. So that is part of being an NBA team, is you will have off nights. However, one thing I've talked about in terms of my concerns with this group, and I felt like they bore out tonight, were, you could tell, and part of this is how Chicago plays, but I also think it was a schematic game plan thing. They just ran at the Lakers all game long, and they were attacking them in transition. They were attacking them in early offense situations. And it was clear. And it wasn't even really like a targeting thing. Like, they targeted Austin a little bit. They targeted Luka a little bit. They targeted Gabe, I think, with his lack of size against some of the guys. But like, it was just kind of like they were just getting by dudes. And again, I think some of this was an uncharacteristic performance by the Lakers and some of the rust and being out of rhythm. And like, there were certainly some factors at play here. However, I think the Bulls kind of showed a little bit of the offensive blueprint for teams, which is like, if you have a certain level of ball handling, of speed, of athleticism, you can kind of just get by that initial point of attack guy and that initial line of defense. And then I thought the Lakers were horrible with their rotations and the backline defense and just some of the decision making that they had there. But I think that this really exposed their point of attack defense. And I think the Lakers have largely been getting by with a good shell defense, a good team defense, and not really the point of attack. And I think when you just get to the highest levels of playing OKC, Boston, Cleveland, whoever else, again, you want to put in that mix, like, I am a bit concerned that those teams can just beat the Lakers off the dribble and they just don't have the defensive personnel in terms of ball containment. Like that to me is a legitimate concern with this team. It's certainly been better in other games, but even, Jalen Brunson, some of like Tatum and Brown kind of just did whatever they wanted those games. Like, and part of that is like a certain level of star. Like, I'm talking about 3 of the top 20, 3 of the top 15 guys in the league. Like, you're going to have that. But tonight it was Kobe White. It was Josh Giddey. It was Buzelis. Like, those guys are not at that level. Kobe White's a really good player. Josh Giddey, I think people hate on him because of the shooting, but like, we saw it tonight. He almost had a quadruple double. He had 8 steals and a triple double. Like, Josh Giddey was awesome tonight, but I am a little concerned with the point of attack defense. I think the rotations, the help defense, the low man stuff, like that is typically better, and I think it will be better. But the point of attack, I think that will be better, but I still think it's kind of a defensive weakness. And then you also saw the lack of rim protection, and they tried different things. They tried Jackson Hayes on Nikola Vucevic. They tried him on, he was rotating a bit like Buzelis and some of their perimeter guys, and then putting LeBron or Rui on Vucevic just to try and, sometimes they've had more success with some of the wing guys or perimeter guys on bigs, and Jackson rotating. Didn't matter. Tonight they got shredded, absolutely shredded. And in terms of a like bigger picture concern for me, I think teams that can really get out in transition against the Lakers, part of it was the causing turnovers, and that created that. So Lakers can clean up the offensive end, and I think they will. But if you could get out in transition and early offense against them, turn it into a bit of a track meet and go athlete for athlete, there are certainly some teams that the Lakers have the athleticism advantage against, but the teams that have the athleticism advantage against them, that's where I think sometimes you just saw like the Lakers couldn't keep up with them on the perimeter. It didn't matter. It was screening actions. It was ISO. It was driving kick. It was second side stuff. Like, it was all facets of the game. They just could not guard Chicago point of attack. So I think it will be better. I think the rotations will be better. I think JJ will adjust, but bigger picture for me, I think that the point of attack defense and some of their ability to match up with some of the quicker and more athletic perimeter scorers, I have real concerns about that. And that will be something to monitor down the final 12 games and then into the playoffs. And then takeaway number 3 for me is new rotation. So I mentioned this is partly because Rui was on a minutes restriction and this was a blowout. They emptied the bench with just under 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. But so Jackson, LeBron, DFS, Luka, and Austin start. LeBron, Luka, and AR are in the low 30s, which I think like if this is a competitive game and they play all 48 competitively, those guys are in the mid to high 30s. So like that makes sense with those three. Jackson played 25. I know there was a lot of Jackson didn't play enough or LA was going small, but like he played 25 of the 41 competitive minutes. I don't really know how much more Jackson's supposed to play. Like maybe that could have been 28, 29, but I don't like Jackson has not been used as a guy like in the mid 30s or something like that. So I think had this game again remained more competitive, maybe Jackson gets up to 29, 30, 31, but that is kind of in line with like the top end of Jackson's minutes. And we can have a debate or discussion on whether that should be higher, but I don't blame this loss on like I thought the small ball minutes were bad, but I don't think the alternative is just like play Jackson 40 minutes. Like, you know, maybe they get there. I don't think they will. Maybe they do, but I don't really blame that. DFS just had an off night, couldn't stop fouling. Vando couldn't stop fouling. Jordan Goodwin also had 3 fouls in his 15 minutes. I thought, as I mentioned, like Gabe was rough outside of the beginning of the fourth quarter. Vando was really rough tonight. Rui hit a couple shots in third, but he just didn't look like himself physically. So part of this was just, I think a lot of guys had off nights. But what was interesting with the rotation was they went with 9 and they did not use Dalton Connect. Dalton Connect was not used in the competitive minutes. They went with a 9-man rotation. And as I've talked about, I think there's a clear top 8. I think Jordan Goodwin has cemented himself as the number 9. And as tonight showed, Dalton is the 10th man. And Dalton did not play. And it is hard to, like with how Vando's struggling offensively, maybe it ultimately becomes a Dalton versus Vando thing in terms of offense, defense. Like, what do you need more? I think Rui, of course, like Rui and DFS, like that's the top 6. The starters plus Rui or DFS, whoever's not starting. I think Gabe, he led the bench in minutes. Gabe is in that top 7. And then I think Jordan Goodwin is really like, he's having more good games than not at this point. And JJ made it clear again tonight that Goodwin has cemented himself in the rotation, that the Lakers have a decision to make with him and his future. So Goodwin is a guy that I like. He played 4 more minutes than Vando tonight. I think he is a guy who is going to play a certain amount of minutes. So I don't really see where Dalton fits in, to be honest, especially when we get closer to the playoffs and it's more of the starters are playing like high 20s plus minutes, and really like the top 7 are playing mid to high 20s plus. When you have that concentration of playing time, you have a little bit of time for Vando, a little bit of time for Goodwin, but like I don't see where the Dalton minutes, come in. And this was a bit of a crystallization in terms of like how they view Dalton. And that's not to say it won't change. Maybe there will be some matchups where they feel like they could play him. Obviously, with the way the game started, the way Chicago was attacking them off the dribble, maybe they just made a call early that like, we don't think Dalton can play in this game because of his defense. But I thought it was interesting to kind of see where the Lakers were at in terms of the rotation. And it was the 5 starters, Rui, Gabe, and Goodwin as like the top 8. Vando was the 9th guy at 11 minutes, which is 4 fewer than anyone else, or at least 4 fewer. And then no Dalton. So kind of our preview of where the Lakers are at in terms of the rotation. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A portion. See, we got first one here from Mitch Potter. Thank you for the super chat. Turnovers are a problem, but I'm mostly confused by the rotation or about the rotation. So I'm glad I just talked about that. Why'd Gabe have 20 minutes when Vando had 11, DK had just 6, and Koloko 0 while dressed? Gabe at 20, I think part of that was, I forget if Gabe was on the floor when he pulled. Let me quickly see. I believe, yeah, Gabe was on the floor Well, no, Gabe just got pulled for DFS at the 8:23 mark. So it was like a minute and a half before JJ emptied the bench. I thought Gabe did not have a good game. He did hit a couple threes early in the fourth, and maybe it seemed like he was about to get some momentum there. And then the third possession, he passed it up, and that kind of ended up being it. With Gabe, like I don't really. I think he might just be. I don't know if you're saying Gabe's minutes are too high or too low here. I think they were kind of in line with where they should have been tonight with how he was playing. Vando at 11. I don't think Vando played well tonight. I thought defensively, there was a few possessions where he switched out and was being aggressive and I think being good defensively. But I thought he only had 2 fouls. I thought he easily could have had 4 or 5. Like he was just hacking everything. And then offensively, like they were trying to run the offense through him, and it just was not working. And I thought it really played like this is like a minor thing, but this is how my brain works. Like I remember earlier in the season when they played San Antonio, they destroyed San Antonio in the Zach Collins minutes, and Zach Collins stuck out like a sore thumb in terms of just not looking like really an NBA caliber big man, and the Lakers really targeting him and just exposing him and his weaknesses. Tonight, Zach Collins, 9 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. Bulls were plus 10 in his 18 minutes. And a big part of that was him going up against Vando and holding his own. And so the Vando at center minutes were not good tonight. DK at just 6. I mean, really, it's DK at 0 because DK only played 6 in garbage time. Like that in the 41 competitive minutes with the primary rotation, DK didn't play. So that one, I don't see who he plays over. Like who is he playing over in the top 9? Like he is not better than any of the top 9 players. Vando, I think you could quibble with when he is being this ineffective offensively, and I think it's kind of been a more recent, like past week and a half ish to 2 weeks of some rough Vando performances offensively. That's like the guy maybe you could talk me into a little bit of a conversation there, but like Jordan Goodwin is just straight up better than Dalton. And he might not score or make as many threes as him, but like he is locking up defensively. He is the rebounding, the screening, the cutting. He's just impacting the game more. Koloko, it's another one where I think they just wanted to go with 9 tonight. Like I think JJ kind of approached it more like a playoff rotation. Obviously not the high minutes of a playoff rotation, but he cut it down to 9 in the competitive portion. And Koloko, I think right now, I've talked about it. Dalton's the 10th guy. Koloko or Jemison, whichever big they're using, is the 11th guy. So I think he just was going 9 deep. And we can, so I guess what Jackson was, let me quickly. So the lineup with the third string guys are 2.5 to third string guys was outscored by 8. So Lakers lost by 31. They subbed the guys out down 23. So in the 25 minutes with Jackson on the floor, they were outscored by 17. In the 16 minutes of the competitive portion with no Jackson, they were only outscored by 6. So I know there was some frustration again about the small ball and some of that stuff not working, but just in terms of just the ledger of what happened with Jackson on versus the centerless minutes, they actually did much better in the centerless minutes. I know maybe with the eye test and Chicago getting to the rim, like maybe you dust off Koloko just to see if he can kind of stop the bleeding in the paint. But I think that the bigger issue, it was just a defensive calamity, a defensive disaster class all over the place. And I don't know if Koloko actually ends up making that much of a difference, to be completely honest. But I mean, maybe he should have, like, it's tough to say, or it's easier to say in hindsight than in the moment. And I know people were saying it in the moment, so I'm not saying you weren't saying that, but I think JJ wanted to approach this with his ideal rotation, and that's the 9 that he played. Avant Traders, thank you for the super chat. The concern is teams with athletic backcourts will destroy the Lakers by doing exactly what the Bulls did. Exactly. That was my takeaway number 2. This is something I've talked about with the Knicks game. Celtics, it's a little different because it's more of an athletic front court, but I think teams with legitimate athletic shot creators and playmakers are going to give the Lakers problems. And that's sort of just, I think, the limitation of the defensive personnel. I think they have some really high IQ defenders and some really good defenders in a team concept, and they are good at shifting an offense into certain spots of the floor and shrinking things. And like, there's a lot that's good about them defensively, but I do think I think there's a reason why JJ has continually called it a team defense. And in a way, like he's kind of admitted it at various points this season, the actual like point of attack or like one-on-one defense isn't great. And that's why I think there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance between how teams or the league kind of views the Lakers defense versus like what it's actually been. And it's been an excellent team defense, but there are some holes and some flaws in the individual defense. And I think that is against the craftier guys, I actually think they hold up fine, and they have high IQ defenders who can hang with those guys. I think the bigger concern for me is more the athleticism and the guys who can create that separation, who can make tough contested shots, who can get to the rim at will. Those guys, and Jalen Brunson's kind of an interesting one because he's crafty, but he's also really quick, and he lives in the mid-range, and that's where he torched the Lakers. Shea will be another one to see how they hold up against him, potentially, depending on how OKC approaches those 2 games in early April. So I'm with you, though. I think that's my biggest concern with their defense right now. Jonesy, thank you for the super chat. We need bigs. They are 6'7" to 6'10". This, I guess, was... I don't disagree. I think the roster is what it is, and the strengths of the roster are not their bigs. And I know, again, we could talk about Koloko, we could talk about Jemison, but like, if we're being honest, Christian Koloko and Trey Jemison are not playoff rotation players. I think something has gone wrong if the Lakers are trying to rely on those guys in the playoffs. They are not among the 10 best players on the team, and the Lakers are probably only going to go 8 or 9 deep in the playoffs. I don't expect them to be used, barring an injury or foul trouble, to the front court. So the makeup of the roster is the wings and the guards, and then Jackson. Like that's the roster. So I think bigger picture, and this is why they traded for Mark Williams temporarily, and why they were looking for another big around the trade deadline. Like, they wanted to bolster the front court and give 2 like playoff caliber centers, and they don't have that. They have 1 right now, and they can go small with Rui or LeBron or Vando. Like tonight, again, weird one. LeBron's coming off of injury. Rui's coming off of injury. I don't think either guy was like ready for the task defensively in terms of what the small ball looks require. So I think ideally, I agree with you. They're not finding that center. I think like if they are changing the roster, it's adding Goodwin and then potentially adding Jemison or Koloko. But again, I don't think those guys, I think there's some promising aspects for either one. I just don't think right now they're playoff caliber. Like, if you look at who the best teams in the league are playing at center, already to Jackson, it's a bit of a drop off or a steep drop off. To like Jemison, Koloko, it's a much steeper drop off. So like those guys against a Chet or Hartenstein, like that's just a mismatch. Those guys against Porzingis or even Horford, like that's just not. It's not a fair fight. So I don't expect those guys to really play. And I think, to your point, like the Lakers are basically in that most of the front court's going to be between like 6'7" and 6'11", with Jackson being the 6'11" guy. Jason Sutton, thank you for this super chat. If Connect isn't part of the playoff rotation, then tonight's game foreshadows a problem Lakers could have when playoffs come because you need spacing around Luka. The Bulls exposed us. That was another thing. And this is something I've been talking about a little bit more over the last few games that I've noticed has been teams are really loading up against Jackson. And Luka had several turnovers trying to find Jackson with interior passes, with lob passes, and the Bulls were ready for that. And I think the Lakers are going to have to counter that. And the counter is the skip pass and finding guys in the corner, finding guys on the weak side. So I think they made a bit of that adjustment in the second half. And really, aside from the turnovers, I don't think the offense was like, again, there was some rust, there was some rhythm stuff, but like outside of the turnovers, I mean, they still scored 115 points. It wasn't like they had this abysmal offensive performance, turnovers aside. It was more so the turnovers, and then the defense was just god awful. So I guess to be completely honest, I'm a little surprised at people being surprised by Dalton not really being in the road. Like I've talked about this. Like Dalton is the 10th man. I think everything we've seen over the past like 2 months has indicated Dalton is the 10th man. I mean, they tried to trade him. That he had that, or they did trade him, that he had, a bit of the down period coming back from the trade. But like, I think like Jordan Goodwin has outplayed him, and there was already a clear top 8. Like at best, before Jordan Goodwin's emergence, Dalton was number 9. He was never ahead of Gabe. He was never ahead of DFS. He was never ahead of Vando. So I'm a little surprised at some of the surprise at the Dalton stuff. Like, could he maybe play as the 10th man like 8 to 10 minutes? Sure. And maybe that will happen in future games. But Dalton is very clearly the 10th man on this team. And I suspect with the way that this group is playing right now, he's unlikely to play in the playoffs. Like again, as the 10th man, unless you're going 10 deep, maybe he's in the fringes or they give him a shift just to see if he can get hot. But like, you don't really go past 9 in the playoffs. So unless he jumps someone else, that it would have to be Vando or Goodwin, and I don't see it being Goodwin. Maybe it's Vando. I don't know, but I've been a little bit surprised at some of the Dalton surprise, I would say. All right. Mixelflix, DK could provide instant offense. He can. I guess anytime we talk about the rotation, I just think it's important to be like, whose minutes should that be coming at the expense of? And maybe it's like, I also think sometimes there can be the reaction of like who had the bad game. And certainly I think Vando's had some rough offensive performances. So maybe it ends up being Vando, but he's also been really good defensively for the most part. And like he just guarded Jokic the other night. It was a big part of LA being in that game in Denver. So it's like, obviously Dalton was a big, like Dalton to me is, if you're without LeBron, if you're without Rui, I think Dalton makes a lot more sense because of his offensive ceiling. And like his offensive ceiling is higher than Vando's. It's higher than Goodwin's. It's higher than Gabe's. Like he can make an impact for you. I think once you're fully healthy though, Luka, LeBron, Austin, Rui, you got your 4 like 15 plus per game scorers. Then like your next tier is like DFS and Gabe, who are going to get you 6 to 12 points a night, depending on how they're shooting. And I don't really think you need offense. I think you need, like, to be clear, I don't think the problem tonight was the offensive end. I thought the problem was the defensive end. And Dalton does not help that. Dalton would have been getting beat off the dribble worse than some of the guys that got beat off the dribble tonight. So like maybe he could have, stopped the bleeding again with some of the shooting and providing some offense. But like the Lakers got beat tonight because of the defense. But like it was not the offense. The turnovers were part of that, but I don't think Dalton necessarily makes them turn the ball over less. I think it was a lot of poor. I mean, spacing for sure is an element, so I'm not going to deny that. I don't see who he plays over. This is an interesting one from Steven2415. Why have the Lakers struggled so much against the East? It's a good, because looking at the standings here, LA is 30-13 against the West, which means they are 13-14 against the East. They are under 500 against the East. That's a really, I've thought about that, but I'm glad you called that out. That's an astute observation. I don't have a great answer for you. I think like some of the games earlier in the season, just looking at their schedule, like they lost to Cleveland twice, they lost to Detroit twice, they lost to Orlando, the Miami loss, Atlanta loss. Like they had some rough road stretches against the East, but also losing to Detroit and Cleveland, like getting swept in the season series, losing to Charlotte, like the road trip, the last road trip, losing to Boston, losing to Brooklyn. So like, yeah, it isn't like, I guess the one encouraging thing would be that, let me double check that. I think they have the second best conference record. They do. Lakers have the second best conference record against the West. Not far behind OKC. OKC's 32-11. So Lakers are 2 games back in the win and loss column there. So if we're like, they're not going to play the East to get to the finals. They would only play one East team in the finals. So against the rest of the West, they've actually done pretty well. And I guess that's a point of encouragement. Colby S30, thank you for the super chat. Sorry to keep bringing this up during a Lakers stream, but what are your thoughts on the Severance finale? I loved it. I thought it was great. I'm not going to spoil anything in case anyone hasn't heard it or watched it yet, or heard it, I guess, depending on how you watch it. Maybe you're watching on your phone or your computer and not paying attention, like I do, and then I have to rewind. I thought it was excellent. I thought it answered most of the questions I had. I think that there's still some questions I wish it addressed. And of course, like any Severance episode, there's more questions now coming off of this one. But there were some of my favorite moments of the show in that episode. I thought it was really well, it was well thought out and well executed. The ending was heartbreaking, but that was to be expected. And it felt like it was trending toward that moment all season once they kind of laid out the stakes. So I would give it a solid like 9.4 for the finale. Rich, thank you for the super chat. I think we are reading too much into defense. We are reading too much into it. Defense was off because offense was off. One affected the other. Trying to flow with Braun set us back for now. I agree with that. I think like just if we, I don't know how many turnovers they had off the top of my head. I think it was 21, but then I think with team turnovers. Okay, 21. Yeah. So Lakers had 21 turnovers. You have 21 turnovers. You are susceptible to be, being beaten by any team in the league. Like it is hard to win a basketball game when you turn the ball over 21 times. And 12 of those turnovers were from Luka and LeBron. So I think you start there. You look at the points conceded off turnovers. They nearly doubled the Lakers. They had 27. The Lakers had 14. Lakers had over double the amount of turnovers of the Bulls. It was 21-10. So that played a part. Lakers went to 16-22 at the free throw line. They missed 6 free throws, shot 73%. That played a part. Chicago took 11 more shots than them, in part because of the free throw. Lakers took 2 more free throws, but the free throw disparity, offensive rebound disparity, 10-9 in Chicago's favor, and then the turnovers led to 11 more shots for the Bulls and 15 more makes for the Bulls. They made 19 threes, 14 in the second half. So they basically matched the Lakers at the free throw line and then dominated them in the paint, 74-42. Fast break points, 30-12. And then, as I said, points off of turnovers. So I agree that the offense being as specifically the turnovers, I think, because Lakers I mean, they shot 48%. It wasn't like they struggled. They shot 41% on threes. They weren't like not making shots. They shot 55% on twos. So the Lakers were making shots. The problem was they weren't getting enough shots because they were turning the ball over so much. So I agree that the turnovers led to a bunch of transition opportunities for Chicago. And it felt like anytime the Lakers messed up, Chicago capitalized and made them pay, or at least got a good look. However, they scored 27 points off of turnovers. They scored 146 points overall. So, and it wasn't like they had some fluky like 40 or 35 like free throw attempt game. They were doing a lot of this in the half court. And that's where that's more so where I come back to in terms of my defensive concerns with this was like, I just felt like they were blowing by the Lakers on the perimeter. And again, it wasn't just ISOs. It wasn't just pick and rolls. It wasn't just like complex actions. It was just, sometimes it was just as simple as like, I'm just targeting this guy and taking him off the dribble. And the Lakers could not contain the ball tonight. So I like to your point, I think there are like both sides of the ball play off of each other. So when you have a poor offensive performance, it is going to affect your defense and vice versa. And I thought tonight, both sides made it harder for the other one. When you're constantly taking the ball out of the basket, it also makes it harder for you to score, and you're constantly going up against a set defense. So that's another part of this. But I don't think the Lakers are going to defend like this the rest of the season. I don't think the Lakers are going to defend like this necessarily any other game or stretch this season. Like this was as bad as it. I think this was their worst defensive performance of the season. It wasn't their worst loss. I still think it's the Miami game, but this was their worst defensive performance of the season. However, even with that potentially being an exception, I think there are always things we can learn. There are always things that can be exposed. And I do think some of the Lakers' defensive flaws and weaknesses and just some of the limitations with how this roster is constructed were on display tonight. And that's just more so what I'm trying to highlight here. Luis, thank you for the super chat. Why is the West historically a better conference? Does it just come down to having a larger market? I don't even know if I'd agree with that last point, because if you look at the markets, if we're talking like the biggest market in the league is New York, and there's 2 New York teams. And then you get to LA. Those are the 2 LA teams. Then you go back east. Chicago's the third biggest market. Houston's a big market. Dallas is a big market. I mean, like the West has some small markets. Utah, New Orleans, San Antonio, Portland's relatively small. Sacramento, Minnesota, Memphis. Those are on the smaller side. Oklahoma City compared to some of the East ones. Like East has Boston, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, Miami. Toronto's a big market, especially given like their outsized influence with Canada, and like they are Canada's team. Philly is a big market. DC. So like the East actually has, I would say on balance, bigger markets. But between the two, I should mention West also has San Francisco, but I think it's relatively close. I would say that the smaller markets are actually more in the West than the East. But this has been going on since, really, it feels like since Jordan retired the second time. After he left Chicago, there was like a clear shift. Like at that point, it was like Utah, the Spurs, the Lakers, Seattle was good, Portland was good, Sacramento was building up. And in like early 2000s, it was Lakers, San Antonio, Sacramento, Portland, Dallas, Phoenix, ultimately in like the mid 2000s. Houston had some good stretches there. So, and then conversely, like the East was always kind of like high 40s, low 50s. Like remember those Nets teams making the finals. Boston had some good years where they weren't a good regular season team. Detroit wasn't like a great regular season team. Then even the Cavs in 2007 making it. So I think kind of from that point on, I think actually comes down to ownership and front offices. I think the better owners and front offices are in the West. I think like San Antonio, I know, of course, more recently they haven't been as good, but San Antonio for 20 plus years was a model of how to run an NBA team. The Lakers have largely been good during the 21st century. You had Golden State and their run. Sacramento was more so early 2000s. Phoenix has had some pretty good teams in there. Minnesota went a while between good teams. Clippers had the Lob City run and Kawhi and PG. Memphis has largely been solid post Pau trade. Denver's always kind of been in the mix. Houston has had like OKC with KD and Russ and Harden, and then KD and Russ, and then Russ and PG, and then now with Shea. You can kind of go down the list. Like Dallas won a title. They had Dirk, then they had Luka. Then you go in the East, that it's Cleveland had LeBron and won a title. Boston has been pretty, but like it's been some pretty bad teams in the East. So I think it largely comes down to the concentration of talent, the ownership, and the front offices. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. Today the Bulls were like the Nuggets. Giddey was like the Joker, and Kobe was like the Murray. Rui top form stopped the Joker, and Braun is Braun. When we get these two back 100%, we'll be good. I worry about DFS and Vandal more. I think DFS have been playing pretty well. Remember, he just had like multiple double-digit scoring games in a row. He had an off night. Vando, I am a little bit worried about, and I feel like he had gotten past some of the offensive stuff, and then more recently, it feels like he's regressed on that end, and I think has kind of been a little bit more hit or miss defensively in terms of his impact. I'm with you. Like Rui and LeBron are going to be fine. The one concern with Rui is just he said tonight he's 70 to 80%, and he's going to be that for the foreseeable future. So if we take it in like the worst case scenario, if he's 70% and he's just 70% the rest of the way, like he can still be impactful, but obviously like the 100% or close to 100% Rui was an awesome player. And again, was the Lakers' fourth best player, fourth most impactful player. They really missed him over the past 3 weeks. And it's better to have him than not have him. But if he's 70% of that, that's obviously a worse player, just objectively based on his own assessment. And that, I think, lowers the Lakers' margin for error a bit, unless guys like DFS or Gabe or Goodwin, or I think Austin can only do so much in terms of like the front court stuff, even Gabe too. But like, it kind of comes to like Jackson, Vando, and DFS. Can they make up for part of Rui's limitations potentially? And I don't know the answer to that. Hope maybe Rui gets up to 80, 85, 90%. We'll see. Maybe time will be good for that. But LeBron, I'm not worried about. I've already said that earlier in the show. And Chicago looked like they look like the prime Warriors tonight. Like they were making everything. They were not turning the ball over, which actually is unlike the prime Warriors. But 19 threes, took care of the ball, got out in transition. Chicago, like I would assume by far this is their best game of the season. Jackson, LeBron minus 27, worst game of the season. Thank you for the super chat. LeBron minus 27, worst game of the season. What happened? He just missed 2 weeks. He said after tonight's game that he is kind of taking things day by day, but with the groin, and that he's not fully over it. He's 40 in year 22. I think if anyone gets a pass in their first game back from an injury, it should be LeBron. With that said, anytime LeBron misses, typically he looks fine. And I thought he finally started to get into rhythm in the like third and fourth offensively. Defensively, I don't think he was great tonight, but by any means. And it had some, like, I mentioned the Patrick Williams 3. I kind of blame LeBron more than Luka. That was a miscommunication there. So, and then he had the turnover that led to the Kobe White 3 to just ice the game. I don't know if worst game of the season. Probably, I would have to really look through that to think about what is LeBron's worst game of the season. Off the top of my head, he had the Clippers game, the second Clippers game, 17 points, 6 of 17 shooting, 8 turnovers in that game. I mean, that was a pretty rough game. Did make up for it more with 9 assists than this past game, but that was a rough game. The Utah game before the break wasn't a good game. I mean, he doesn't have many bad. I like the at Minnesota, 10 points, 4 for 16 shooting, 6 turnovers on December 2nd. I think that was a worse game than tonight. Also, the OKC game, 12 points, 5 of 13 shooting, 5 turnovers. I think that was a worse game than tonight. So the at Phoenix, 11 points. Remember that game? He barely got to double figures. He hit that 3 late in the fourth that saved his double-digit streak. 3 for 14 shooting in that game. So I think he's had worse games in this one. I like maybe from a plus minus perspective, I don't the box scores I'm looking at right now don't have the plus minus. So maybe from a plus minus perspective, though, I would assume that Miami game, just out of curiosity, I'm gonna pull that one up right now. I mean, they lost by 41, and Lakers were minus 21 in his minutes. So this was a worse plus minus than that. Maybe from a plus minus perspective, it was his worst, but I don't think this was his worst game overall. Philip passes when Braun has lowered effort defensive games. This tends to happen because everyone follows. Honestly, I wouldn't look too much into this. I agree to an extent, and again, like I think one thing I've tried to hammer all season, and I've tried to be consistent with this, is like when guys come back from injury, there is some type of adjustment period. Like I think sometimes things take time, and you would like to fast track the process. You'd like to easy bake oven it, right? And with Luka, it took some time once he got to the Lakers to get him fully acclimated, and they had the Utah and Charlotte losses. I think when like Vando at first was a bit rusty coming off of missing as much time as he's missed. I think even Gabe, like in the beginning of the season, remember the shooting slump and him still getting his legs back after missing so much time and playing at the end of last season, but not really playing like a full amount of games as he started like this season off. So like Jackson, he missed a month. He came back. He was pretty rough. So I just think this is par for the course when guys come back from injuries. Like they tend to take some time to get back into game shape, game conditioning. Lakers haven't been practicing. So there's rhythm and rust and a lot of elements going into why LeBron and Rui. And frankly, I think both guys probably pushed it a little bit to get back and are not 100% yet. So that's another element here. So I'm not worried about that. I don't think that changes the Lakers' point of attack defense. I think that's still a bit of a concern for me, but I will, again, I'm just trying to kind of suss through like what's real and what's not. And as I said before, I don't think they're going to defend like this ever again. I think they're going to be much better defensively moving forward. I just think that there are some things that if I'm scouting the Lakers, I would look at and try to apply. And I think if you have that elite level athleticism, shot creation, you can get some pretty good looks against them. And then it kind of comes down to just like, are you making them like, how's your night going? But tonight, Kobe White was just on fire. Natalia, thank you. Why was JJ's strategy to leave Chicago wide open? They shoot the second most threes behind Boston. That is a good question. And JJ talked about that. He said that they were selectively letting some of these guys shoot. So, but then he had them shift away from that later and they continue to make shots. And that is like one thing I will say too with that is the Lakers have benefited from, and JJ pushed back against this, but I would push back against that pushback. Like I think the Lakers have benefited from some good opponent shooting they have been giving up a bunch of open threes. And as we saw last year, like that was a similar strategy, honestly, to Darvin's strategy last year of if you're a non-shooter, we're going to ignore you. We're going to give you open threes. But these guys are not robots. They are not, the game is not played on a spreadsheet. And once a guy, especially like a subpar shooter, makes a three or two, to go back to the infamous Dante Exum game last season when he hit 7 threes against the Lakers in Dallas. Once you see 1 or 2 go down and you are a guy who maybe struggles with confidence, struggles with rhythm, you just get a little bit of a spark there. And all of a sudden you start to there's the avalanche of threes. So on the season, Buzelis is a 32% three-point shooter. So JJ had alluded to him as being a guy they wanted to play off of, but he went 5 for 10 tonight. Kobe White's a good shooter. He's 36% on the season on threes, 37% for his career. He went 6 for 9. Patrick Williams, pulling him up. He's a 34% three-point shooter, but 39% for his career. So he's kind of having a down year. He's another guy who went 4 for 7. So it was primarily those 3 guys. They combined for 15 of the Bulls' 19 threes. And I think the Buzelis ones really hurt them because that's a guy who on paper is not a good shooter, but he burned them tonight. So I think more often than not, this strategy has worked of leaving the non-shooters open and forcing them to try to make shots and beat you. Like we saw that in the Denver win in Denver, where Aaron Gordon hit a few, Russell Westbrook hit a few, but they stuck with that and ultimately won by a lot of points because they were winning that kind of chess match. Tonight, it backfired. So I think overall the results have been more positive than negative, but it is certainly a risk. And I think the Lakers have been due for some regression against them in terms of opponent shooting, because I think it's hard to be both a high volume 3-point defense in terms of allowing high number of threes and also a low percentage of those threes going in. You can only warp the floor so much. Like at some point, you give guys target practice, they're going to make threes. So I think the Lakers have actually benefited a lot from that to some extent. And it felt like tonight what was kind of the regression of, okay, if you continue to give a team open threes, they're going to start to make them. And again, they've won that battle more often than not, but there are times they're going to lose it. And tonight was one of those times. Diego Cardona, sorry we didn't get to meet up at halftime, but this is tough. Thank you for the super chat. Tough loss tonight, but I got to experience Luka Magic live in the first half, which was an incredible experience. Thank you for the DM response, Jovan. Maybe next time we can link up. Yeah, I always check my DMs at halftime just to see if anyone had DM'd me, because it's kind of been like pretty much been like every home game now. I've gotten a DM to meet up, and so I saw you and recognized your name, but we weren't able to link up, but hopefully next game. But yeah, I mean, first half of Luka, like when he tied the game at I want to say it was 59. Lakers had been down by like around 10 or so. They went on that run. He hits LeBron, misses a 3, ball gets batted out. It's honestly kind of reminiscent of Divac hitting the ball out to Ori. It was more like jumbled. There was like multiple guys kind of tipping at it. Then it gets tipped out to Luka at the top of the arc. He drains the 3, ties the game. Bulls call timeout, 59-59. And it felt like that was going to be a turning point where the Lakers finally like took back control of the game, took the lead. Then Chicago closed the half on a 6-3 run. Nearly made that shot there at the end. That would have been, that always happens to the Lakers is teams hit shots against them to close quarters. But yeah, that was an awesome first half from Luka. And even, I would say first 2.5 quarters from Luka. Like it was a fun Luka game. All right, I'm going to go 5 more minutes here. A real 5 more minutes. Oh, did the Bulls play last night? No, they played 2 nights ago. Okay, I was going to say if this was on the second night of a back-to-back, that would have been more impressive. But they played 2 nights ago in Sacramento. All right. Any questions here before we wrap up? All right. Mike Zhang getting to it. So who's going to get waived? So I'm glad you asked this because I got aggregated. I'm sure some of you guys saw it. Maybe not. Hopefully not because it wasn't true. But I was asked last stream. Someone asked me if all 3 two-way guys can be converted. And I said, technically, yes, all 3 can be converted to the official roster, but that would require 3 players being waived. And as of right now, I only see 2 obvious candidates in terms of guys to be waived, and those are Cam Reddish and Alex Len. I did not say they're going to be waived. I did not say they are expected to be waived. I also then provided the context of Shake Milton has 2 more years non-guaranteed, which is valuable for the Lakers to potentially include in a trade this offseason or down the road at some point. And then Markieff Morris is a beloved figure in that locker room. It's kind of like the 2020 Jared Dudley in that locker room. LeBron loves him. I forgot if it was Marcus or Markieff shared. I think it was Marcus shared the story that I was on the podcast with Kevin O'Connor on Yahoo Sports that Markieff was considering, once he found out he was getting traded, he didn't really want to move. He was considering retiring. And LeBron told him, like, no, we need you here. You need to come here. So LeBron loves Keefe. His locker is right next to LeBron's. Luka loves Keefe as well. Keefe is not getting waived. Shake, I would say Keefe is not getting waived like 99.9%. Shake is maybe like somewhere in the 90 to 95% range of I'd be pretty surprised because of how valuable that contract is. Then you get to Len and Reddish, and what I will say, and I will make myself clear, so if you want to aggregate this, aggregate what I'm actually saying. If the Lakers are going to convert Jordan Goodwin or convert Trey Jemison or convert Christian Coloco, I look at those 2 guys as the 2 most likely candidates to be waived. I'm not saying it is going to happen. I'm not saying it is expected to happen. So I want to be clear with that. However, I would, this is making an educated guess / assumption here, assume that Jordan Goodwin is going to be on the Lakers playoff roster. I would be very surprised if he was not on the playoff roster. Now, whether that's Len or Reddish, that is not as clear. I think between the 2, Reddish is maybe a little bit more likely to be waived between those 2, but I think it's close. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I again would assume that Goodwin is on the playoff roster. As to who's waived, I don't have a clear insight into that as of right now. But then Jemison and Coloco, I think that's more of there's the element of like which one of those guys deserves the playoff spot, and then who is the second guy. Although again, I think the 2 most likely candidates are clear, but I'm not saying it's happening. I'm not saying it's expected to happen. So I want to be clear with that and intentional with how I answer this. So again, if I had to handicap it, I would say Reddish is the most likely of the guys, and then Len is a close second if they do a second one. But I think that one's pretty close to 50-50 in terms of if they have to waive one of them, which again, I think with how Goodwin's playing, it would be insane not to put him on the playoff roster. L.A. Jovan, do you think JJ is playing too many non-offensive threats in the Gabe / Goodwin Vando rotations? Should DK be subbed in for at least one of them? I think so. I made this point before that I forgot I think someone asked about staggering with LeBron and Luka and Austin or something like that. And I said that I'm not necessarily as concerned with the staggering. Like, I think they're going to figure that out. And if anything, I'd almost like them to get a little bit more on court reps together just to fast track that process, or just get as many reps and as much experience as possible. And then if you have to wean that down a little bit in the playoffs to kind of just make sure that one is on the floor at all times, or that two of the three are on the floor at all times, like I think that's fine. Like you can always kind of walk it back rather than create the experience that they just don't have together. But my thing was like, I don't like these Luka or LeBron plus like 4 non-offensive guys. I don't think that those lineups have actually done better than you would think, but they are contingent on that group defending its ass off, and also like a little bit of shot luck or kind of over exceeding offensive expectations. And if one of those two things doesn't happen, if they defend well but they're not making shots, or they're not defending well and even they are making shots but it's kind of like an even trade-off, then like I think those lineups can be really problematic. And I think when we've seen the Lakers struggle at times, especially like middle portions of games, it's been some of these types of lineups where they just have too many negative offensive guys. So I would like to see, ideally, I think you get to a point, and Rui's recovery or whatnot is going to be a little tricky here, but if Rui can get back to being more like himself, I think LeBron, Rui, Luka, and Austin, you need 2 of those guys on the floor at all times. I think like that's what it needs to be, is at least 2. If of course, 3 or 4 is great too, but you should never have fewer than 2 of those 4 on the floor. And I think that's going to be the case in the playoffs. And the regular season, it's a little trickier. Now, to your point about Dalton, I just don't know who is he playing over? That's my question. I think there's a set in stone top 7. I think it's the starters right now plus Rui plus Gabe. Like that's the set in stone top 7. I think Jordan Goodwin is playing really good basketball on both sides of the floor, and he might not have the point totals or the shot totals that stand out, but like he is doing really important things with his offensive rebounding, the cutting, the short roll playmaking. He's been a critical piece. I guess then you get to like Vando versus Dalton, but I don't want to overreact to some of Vando's recent struggles and overlook how good he's been defensively and how crucial he's been defensively. Like Vando's upside defensively is the best defender on this team. I guess it's maybe between him and LeBron in terms of like peak defense, but I would probably even lead Vando with that. So I don't want to overlook that. Now Dalton can get hot, but I think we've also seen, like, how many games have we seen where the Lakers kind of play Dalton 2 shifts and he like maybe hits a shot or two, doesn't really do much offensively, does provide spacing, but like isn't putting points on the board, which is, if Dalton's playing, like he kind of needs to put points on the board. There is a spacing benefit as well, but like you kind of need him to score to offset the defense. And I think he's had plenty of those games where he doesn't really do that, and then he's not really helping defensively, and then it's kind of like those are not the best minutes. So I don't, again, if you want to argue for the rotation being 10 players, I think that's certainly fair, that's plausible. If we're saying 9, which it seemed like that JJ has said that's his ideal regular season rotation is 9, I don't think Dalton's in the top 9, and I don't see who he plays over outside of maybe Vando if the defense, if his offense continues to struggle. But even then, Vando's kind of your backup 5 or 4-5, whatever. And now you're losing a lot of size and athleticism and front court defense. So that, like, now you're arguing Dalton versus Gabe maybe, or Dalton versus Goodwin. I think those guys on balance have just been better. They're much better defenders. And JJ's not going to play Dalton above Gabe and maybe Goodwin, but I think Goodwin's just better. Like I don't want to overthink that one. Stephen Lee, Jovan, do you think JJ was outcoached tonight? In some ways, yeah. I think What was interesting was JJ kind of laid out the blueprint of how Chicago was going to attack them, and that's exactly how they attacked them, and there's nothing they could do about it. So he was like aware of what was going to happen, and even after the game, he was like, "You can prep for something, you can watch the film, you can have the game plan, you can communicate that to the players, you can go in and try to make some adjustments, but some nights you're just watching the game and you're like, we can't stop this, or like we don't have an answer for this," and that was tonight. So it felt like he knew how Chicago was going to play. He knew how they were going to try to attack the Lakers. He tried to have a game plan for it, and it ultimately didn't work. So, I mean, I don't. The thing I want to stay away from is like I don't want it to always be like a results based thing where tonight the Lakers won, so JJ outcoached Coach X, and tonight the Lakers lost, so JJ was outcoached by Coach Y. Like I don't really believe in like viewing it that way, but certainly with how bad the defense was, I don't think it's fair to solely put that on the players. And I even think some of the timeouts, I felt like there were pockets where the Bulls were gaining some momentum, and like you do only have a certain amount of timeouts, but I felt like he could have been a little bit more proactive with stopping the momentum. So yeah, I mean, I would say, well, when you lose by 31, it's hard to make the case that he coached like matched Billy Donovan tonight, right? But I think there was certainly some things he could have done better, and I'm sure if you asked him, things he would take back. Jorge, thank you for the super chat. Tough loss to a team who couldn't miss. Thanks, Jovan, for taking time to talk to a fan and take a photo. You a real one. Or George, then, if I know sometimes the spelling is different ways, but nice to meet you at tonight's game, and thank you for the support. Thank you for being a real one, and thank you for listening to be every night and annoying your girlfriend. Paranormal says, "Me and my family love you, dude." I appreciate that. I love you guys. King Carter, Jovan is covering the Lakers make your job easier as opposed to being a beat writer for the Hawks or Wizards. Shots fired at Atlanta and DC. I think you got to throw the Charlotte Hornets in there too. Really, the Southeast division is a tough division outside of Miami. Yeah, yes and no. I think that it's like objectively, it's like better for my career to be covering the Lakers than the Hawks or the Wizards. There's more national interest. There's more interest in general. There's more news. There's more attention. I would say it certainly comes with like increased level of scrutiny. Like if I was getting misaggregated about who the Wizards were going to cut, I don't think these aggregation X accounts are posting that and getting like I don't care. I don't care about the smoke because bring the smoke. Like Legion Hoops was the primary one who tweeted out what I said. They did not tweet. The funniest part to me was like typically there's at least like a link back to like the original source. There was no original source here. People just were running with Jovan said that Reddish and Len are going to be cut, and they said that per Jovan and got like over 2,000 retweets. Guarantee if I'm talking about the back end of the Wizards rotation or the Hawks or even the Heat, like I don't think it's going viral or semi-viral, whatever, on X that these back end players on the roster are getting cut. So with the Lakers, there's certainly an element of like your profile, the attention, the scrutiny that can have its pros and cons. Again, I get misaggregated, taken out of context all the time, and people like to use my name for leverage, unfortunately, or for their benefit, and that's unfortunate, but it comes with it, right? So I'd rather be more relevant. I'd rather have people misaggregate me than like not be as relevant and not have that to some extent, right? Just because in this business, like to some extent, it does come down to like, are you relevant? Are people talking about you? Does what you say matter? Like, where's the attention? Like, I mean, there's a reason why the people that are at the top of the business are talked about the most because they get the most attention. They get them, and now we can debate on some of the stuff of in terms of what they say and whether that's the best way to get attention. And that's why if you guys have been following me for a while, you know how I go about my business, and I try not to get attention that way. But certainly covering the Lakers is better than covering, like, I'd rather cover the Lakers than any other team. But even trying to look at it objectively, I don't know a team that would be better to cover in terms of your profile and like your attention. Knicks are up there, Celtics are up there, Warriors are up there, but I still put the Lakers ahead of any of those. Mitch Potter, when we doing memberships, Jovan? We're doing them soon. My thing with memberships is I want to be. I want to offer something that like is valuable, and I also want to offer something I can commit to. And I think once I set a certain something, I'm most likely thinking between 2 and 3 tiers right now. Once I set a tier of something, obviously, like I don't want to like overpromise and underdeliver or set certain expectations and then it just not be realistic. So I'm trying to be intentional with like what I do for each tier and make sure it's something that is sustainable and that I want to do for the long run and that you guys would want to pay a potential membership for. So I'm kind of weighing through that. If you guys have ideas, I would love to know. Ideally, maybe I'll do like a community post and you guys can respond with like what you would ideally like. I've thought about a certain tier, maybe a once a month Zoom, maybe a couple of private streams a month, and that kind of just being a space for us to talk more candidly and not, hopefully no one's going to aggregate me off of that, right? But it could be a little bit more of a candid space, and ideally, if you're paying for that, then you're not trying to expose what I'm saying kind of behind the scenes, but with certain things. So something like that, like I've been kind of weighing that. Obviously, the meetups, I think I want to keep like that separate from memberships and keep that open to everybody. But I'm just trying to. They are coming soon. I'm just trying to make sure it's like something that if I'm setting this and setting a price for something, I am delivering on that. That's the biggest thing is I do not want to say something that I can't deliver on. So that's my biggest thing. Britain, thank you for the super chat. Jovan, what team, if it wasn't the Lakers, would you want to be a reporter for if it was solely based off of that arena's experience? I guess the Knicks. I think that they're arguably the second biggest team to cover. I'd love to, like, if I wasn't living in LA, New York would be my second choice. I think that then, like, I don't think they're going to win a title, but there's a certain, like, MSG is the Mecca. They have their own kind of branding and culture and a bunch of celebrities there. And like, I think there's a certain level of buzz and attention with the Knicks. It is a pretty big drop. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it is a pretty big drop off to whoever else. Cause like the Warriors aren't what they used to be. The Celtics, like that would just, I don't think I could do it. I actually like Boston as a city, but I just, it'd be weird. And then I'm not Chicago. I mean, Chicago's been mediocre for most of the last 20 years. I'm not. Yeah. So I think it'd be the Knicks, I guess. All right. I am going to wrap here. Just at the 1:30 mark, went about 15 minutes over, but that's what we do here on Buha's Block. But thank you all so much for watching and listening. Promise things will get better. Don't tough loss, but Lakers will bounce back. You know, sometimes going on the road could actually be a good thing. It can galvanize and reconnect a group. But that'll do it. So for those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back Monday after Lakers Magic to break that all down. Then we'll have a couple of episodes during the week, and we'll be traveling and breaking it all down, though. So be on the lookout for that. Potentially the vlog is done. I just gotta do the voiceover. So maybe if you guys want the vlog tomorrow, I will give you the vlog tomorrow. I also wasn't sure if at this point too much time had passed, but let me know either here or in the comment section if you guys want the vlog, and I will do my best to get that to you tomorrow. But that'll do it. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Appreciate you all. Appreciate everybody supporting. And let's get those likes up. As Jake from State Farm says, Mitch says vlog tomorrow. Connor says too much time can never pass. All right. So let's get the vlog out. But that'll do it. I'll talk to you all very soon.